Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This time, we're diving into a case that still sends chills down your spine, even after all these years. The 1982 Chicago Tylenol Murders.
Yeah, it's one of those cases that really gets under your skin, you know?
Absolutely, and it reminds us that even the most ordinary things, like a bottle of pain reliever, can become instruments of fear and tragedy.
It's true. Think about it. We reach for those things without a second thought. But in 1982, that all changed.
It did. It all started in the fall, in the suburbs of Chicago. A seemingly normal day, right?
As normal as any other, until it wasn't.
Right. And at the heart of this story is a young girl, Mary Kellerman, just 12 years old. She woke up feeling sick, and like any parents would do, hers gave her some extra strength Tylenol.
Something millions of us have done countless times.
Exactly. But for Mary, that simple act had unimaginable consequences.
It's just heartbreaking. She died not long after taking those Tylenol capsules. And the scariest part? No one could figure out why.
It's like something out of a nightmare. You wake up with a headache, you take something to feel better.
And it's the last thing you ever do.
Exactly. And tragically, Mary's death was only the beginning.
It's almost hard to comprehend, isn't it, that something so commonplace, so readily available, could be used as a weapon. But over the next few days, 6 more people in the Chicago area died under eerily similar circumstances.
It's chilling. And as you read through the details of this case, the victims' stories, it's impossible not to feel the weight of the tragedy.
Absolutely. Adam Janus, just 27 years old, his brother, Stanley, and their sister-in-law, Teresa, all gone. Then there were Mary Reiner, Mary McFarland, Paula Prince. Each loss sent shockwaves through the community. People were terrified, and rightfully so.
Imagine the fear that gripped the city. Every bottle of Tylenol suddenly seemed like a potential threat.
Can you imagine going to your medicine cabinet, that place that's supposed to hold comfort and relief, and feeling that kind of fear? It's a fundamental violation of trust.
Absolutely. But initially, the investigators were stumped, right?
Yeah.
They had no idea what was causing these deaths, let alone who was behind it.
It was a scramble. They were up against a silent, invisible enemy. It's incredible what finally cracked the case open, though a tiny detail, something almost easy to miss.
I know, right? The scent of bitter almonds. It's one of those small details that sends chills down your spine when you realize its significance.
It's almost like something out of a detective novel. That faint, almost sweet odor, it was a telltale sign for anyone familiar with cyanide poisoning.
And that's exactly what it was. Potassium cyanide. A deadly poison found inside those Tylenol capsules.
Someone had deliberately laced those capsules with a lethal dose.
But what made this even more terrifying was that it didn't happen at the factory. The tampering occurred somewhere along the line after those bottles left production.
It was a horrifying realization. Imagine someone could have tampered with those bottles in transit, in the warehouse, even right there on the store shelves.
It completely shattered any sense of security people had. If something as simple as a bottle of Tylenol could be tampered with, what was safe?
It's a chilling thought, isn't it? And it really speaks to the level of calculation and premeditation involved in these crimes. This wasn't just a random act of violence. This was deliberate, it was methodical, and it targeted the most basic sense of trust we have.
It really makes you question everything you pick up at the store, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. That feeling of vulnerability, it really hit a nerve with the public.
And understandably so. The authorities were facing a massive public health crisis, a full-blown panic.
It was a race against time.
Yeah.
They had to figure out who was behind these poisonings and stop them before any more lives were lost.
You're talking about a nationwide manhunt, right?
The FBI, local law enforcement, everyone was working around the clock, and the media coverage.
Oh, I bet. It was front-page news everywhere, nonstop.
Every newsstand, every TV screen, it was inescapable. And in the middle of all this chaos, Johnson & Johnson, they had to act fast.
Absolutely. I mean, 31 million bottles of Tylenol, recalled, that's unprecedented.
Can you even imagine the logistical nightmare? The financial hit. We're talking over $100 million. But it wasn't just about the money, was it?
No, not at all. It was about public trust. That had been completely shattered.
Exactly. How do you even begin to rebuild that sense of security after something like this? It wasn't just about finding the person who did this. It was about reassuring an entire nation that something like this wouldn't happen again.
It's almost like trying to put the pieces of broken mirror back together, isn't it?
It's a powerful analogy. And while they were trying to do that, investigators were chasing down every lead. And there were some promising leads too.
Like James William Lewis, right? The extortion letter. It's chilling how someone could exploit a tragedy like this for their own gain.
$1 million. That's what he demanded in exchange for stopping the poisoning.
$1 million. It's just despicable. But did they ever actually connect him to the actual tampering?
Well, that's the thing. He was convicted, yes, but for extortion, not for the murders.
So they couldn't definitively prove he was the one who put the cyanide in the capsules.
They couldn't. He was in New York when the Chicago deaths happened, and despite a lot of investigation, no direct link was ever established.
So Lewis was a dead end. What of the warehouse worker? Roger Arnold. Right. His story is just tragic.
It really is. Talk about being in the wrong place at the wrong time. He worked at a facility that handled Tylenol, and at some point, he made some offhand remarks about the case.
Oh boy, I bet the media had a field day with that.
Oh, absolutely. Suddenly, he was thrust into the spotlight. His name was everywhere, plastered all over the news.
It's scary how quickly public opinion can turn someone into a suspect, isn't it?
It's the court of public opinion, and it can be incredibly swift and unforgiving. And in Arnold's case, it cost him dearly. He always maintained his innocence, and investigators could never find any actual evidence to tie him to the poisonings.
But the damage was done, wasn't it?
It was. He lost his job, his marriage fell apart. It's a stark reminder that even when you're proven innocent, the shadow of suspicion can linger.
It's a haunting thought. So we have Lewis, the extortionist, with no direct ties to the actual murders, and Arnold, the warehouse worker, completely cleared. Where does that leave the investigation all these years later?
Sadly, at a standstill. Despite advancements in forensic technology, DNA analysis, all the tools at their disposal, the case remains cold. And that's part of what makes this case so captivating, so frustrating. The question of who remains unanswered.
It's unsettling to think that someone could commit such a calculated act, cause so much fear, and just disappear.
It really is, and what's even more unsettling is that they might have gotten away with it.
It's a mystery that continues to fascinate and haunt us, even after all these years. But I think it's important to remember that this case wasn't just about the mystery. It had a profound impact on the way we think about product safety, even today.
Oh, absolutely. Before 1982, the idea of someone tampering with over-the-counter medications on store shelves was almost unthinkable.
It's like it exposed a vulnerability we didn't even know we had.
Exactly, and the consequences were significant. Think about the changes we saw: tamper-evident seals, those little plastic rings that have to be broken before you can open a bottle.
It's something we take for granted now, but it's all thanks to the Tylenol murders.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just the packaging. Induction sealing, child-proof caps, all of these measures were put in place to make it that much harder for someone to tamper with products.
And then there was the Tylenol bill in 1983, making product tampering a federal offense. It really shows how seriously everyone was taking this.
It was a clear message. This kind of behavior wouldn't be tolerated. And it wasn't just the government that stepped up. Johnson & Johnson, to their credit, they really set the standard for corporate responsibility in a crisis.
Absolutely. They pulled 31 million bottles of Tylenol off the shelves. Think about the financial hit they took.
Yeah.
But they put public safety first.
And they were transparent throughout the whole process. They communicated with the public, acknowledged their mistakes, and outlined the steps they were taking to regain trust. It became a model for crisis management.
It's amazing how a tragedy like this can lead to such significant changes. But it makes you wonder, has it really made us safer? Or are we just one step ahead of a different kind of danger now?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The world is a different place now. We've got cyber threats, bioterrorism. The landscape of risk is constantly evolving.
It's a scary thought. But I guess it all comes back to being vigilant, being aware, and never taking our safety for granted.
I think that's a great takeaway. We might never know who was behind the Tylenol murders, but their actions left an undeniable mark on our world.
They did. It's a story about vulnerability, yes, but also about resilience, adaptation, and the importance of never letting our guard down. Well, on that note, deep divers, we're going to leave you with a final thought to ponder. In the decades since the Tylenol murders, do you think we've truly become safer? Or is it all just an illusion, a fleeting sense of security in a world where danger is constantly evolving? Let us know what you think. Until next time, keep asking those tough questions and keep diving deep.